This is the His and Her Money Show, where we talk about managing money, marriage, and everything in between. Now, here are your hosts, America's #1 money couple, Talent and Ty McNeely.
Welcome back to an all-new edition of the His and Her Money Show with America's #1 money couple, Talent and Ty McNeely. Super glad that you guys are here with us for another great edition of the show. We're really excited about this episode because this is going to be super helpful. There's so much going on with insurance and the Affordable Care Act. It's all in the news, and people are trying to figure out, like, I don't even know how to use this. What's a good plan? What's not a good plan? What should I be looking for? What should I be staying away from? And so we heard you loud and clear. And so we reached out to an expert on the matter to help us all navigate this and make the right decision. We're going to be talking with Jennifer Fitzgerald, who is one of the founders of our favorite insurance company, Policy Genius. And we're going to have a long, detailed discussion about everything that you need to know when it comes to getting the best possible plans underneath the Affordable Care Act. And all the links to everything that's discussed here on the show today, you can find in hisandhermoney.com/podcast. So let's get Jennifer on the line so we can get all of her wisdom and start to apply it right away. Hey, Jennifer, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
We're so glad to have you here because you know what? There's all these changes and all these new rules around healthcare, and a lot of people have a lot of questions. And we're so glad that we can have you, an expert in this topic, to come help us all understand our options a little bit better so that we can make the right decisions with our healthcare moving forward. Before we get into it, can you take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody tuned in and let them know what you're all about?
Sure. My name is Jennifer Fitzgerald. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Policy Genius. And what we've done is created a digital platform for consumers for all of their insurance needs. So that's everything from life insurance to disability insurance, and as of November, health insurance.
Awesome. So can you break down what the Affordable Care Act is and how it affects the everyday person?
You bet. And that's a topic that I think everybody's seen a lot of in the media and the newspapers. So at its core, the Affordable Care Act was passed a few years ago, and it did a few things. One is it enacted a lot of consumer protections for health insurance, meaning that any health insurance plan sold on the market had to comply with a few things. One is they can't discriminate based on pre-existing conditions, right? So if you have diabetes, if you had a cancer diagnosis, none of that can be taken into account in pricing. Basically, pricing is fixed on your zip code, your age, your gender, whether you're a smoker. That's it. Whereas before, folks who were managing health conditions would either face higher prices or potentially not be insurable. The second thing that it did was mandated common features across health insurance plans. So every health insurance plan has an out-of-pocket maximum that you would be required to pay in a given year. And that's for everything. So that's for doctor's visits, out-of-pocket, prescriptions. So for an individual, that's going to be in the $6,000 range. For a family, it's going to be twice that. Meaning, even if you have a catastrophic health year, as long as you guys are all covered on a health insurance plan, the most the family would have to pay out of pocket is around $13,000 or $14,000, right? It sounds like a lot of money, but before the Affordable Care Act, a lot of health insurance plans didn't have that cap, right? So, which is how people were forced into medical bankruptcy. The last piece of the Affordable Care Act, and this is the one that probably gets a lot of attention, is the individual mandate, meaning by law, you're required to have health insurance or you pay a tax penalty on your tax returns. And the reason why that exists is so that you can have coverage for pre-existing conditions, right? So the only way that health insurance works on a non-discriminatory basis is if you have young, healthy people paying into the system, right? So that's how older and less healthy people can get coverage. So otherwise, if there wasn't the mandate, people could just sign up for health insurance when they started to feel sick or knew that they had to have surgery, and then they would drop it immediately thereafter. So the mandate and open enrollment periods are an important piece of making sure that even sick people can get health insurance. And then the final piece of the Affordable Care Act is the system of tax subsidies it's created. So for folks who earn anywhere between 100% and 400% of the federal poverty limit, and that's state specific and based on the size of your household, you qualify for tax subsidies, which the government will pay directly to your health insurance company to bring down the overall cost of your health insurance on a monthly basis.
Wow.
So that's like the the 2-minute the 2-minute primer on the Affordable Care Act.
And I know there's a lot more detailed information on you all's website at Policy Genius. So everybody be sure when you get done with this that you all go over to Policy Genius and check out more detailed information there. Now, with the new year, there's been a lot of changes, and in the news, it seems like they're talking about even more changes to come, the possible even, doing away of the Affordable Care Act. So for everybody, that's listening, what should we be listening for as we're watching all this unfold?
The big thing to listen for is if you are on a plan in the open marketplace, and this is especially important for folks who are self-employed or work part-time and have to find their own health insurance plan, you should be paying very close attention to the changes that are happening, right? So especially if you have a pre-existing condition, because a lot of the changes would impact that provision. And folks who have health insurance now may not be able to have health insurance if some of these changes go through. Now, the big thing to keep in mind is that the plans that are on sale now and are on the marketplace now, those are contractually locked in through 2017. So if you enroll in a health insurance plan now, you're going to have that same health insurance plan at least through 2017. A lot of the big changes that they're proposing that could affect the design or features on health insurance at earliest would probably go into effect 2018 or 2019. There would be a transition period. Plans would probably be grandfathered in because it's a big deal. It affects hundreds of insurance companies, across all 50 states. So even if they did a full repeal of the Affordable Care Act, it would take time to unwind and make sure new plans are compliant. So no immediate changes probably for 2017, but, lots getting thrown around there in terms of changes. Interestingly, the administration that's taking office next week, who knows what they're going to do, right? So there have been a bunch of proposed changes. They've actually been walking that back as folks, complain and say, hey, wait a second, I don't want to lose my health insurance, or I have a pre-existing condition, or my child has a pre-existing condition. So it's going to be a pretty political issue, kind of like the original law was a few years ago.
Yeah. So where are you seeing the highest increase in premiums?
So in premiums across the board have generally gone up. And I know the Affordable Care Act gets a lot of the blame for that. But to be honest, health insurance premiums have been going up for the last 20 years every year, even before the Affordable Care Act. So it's unfortunate that healthcare expenses and that whole part of our economy, costs have just continued to go up. So what folks will see on the marketplace for 2017 plans is, probably higher premiums than they saw last year. That said, healthcare.gov released a study that said 70% of Americans can find at least one plan under $75 a month. And that's using tax subsidies, right? So it might not be the exact plan you want. It might not have your doctors on it, but, there typically are lower cost options out there for most folks who are subsidy eligible. You'll also see higher deductible plans. It's just a fact of life. Most people end up getting a plan with a high deductible of at least $2,000, which increases your out-of-pocket expenses in a given year.
Okay. And we know there's a lot of people out there, like you said, that are self-employed or they work part-time, and so they're responsible for gathering their own health insurance for themselves and for their families. So when they are shopping, what are some things that they should be looking out for when they're scouring through all these lists of different plan options?
Sure. I think, there's a handful of decisions that you'll have to make when picking the plan. The most important thing to keep in mind, and we tell this to our consumers who come to the platform, is there's no perfect answer. There's no, health insurance plan at the bottom of the maze that's going to have everything you want on it. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist. Health insurance is a series of trade-offs, meaning that you have to pick between like a lower monthly premium or a higher deductible, right? Meaning you'll have to trade off, bigger network size, but that's going to be a more expensive plan, right? So it's really around just getting comfortable around those decisions and what you're comfortable with in terms of a health insurance plan. Now, the nice thing is, following the Affordable Care Act, you don't have to worry about things like, will cancer be covered? Will my diabetes medications be covered? Because those conditions, every single plan has to provide, the 10 essential health benefits. So you don't have to worry about that. It's more around getting to a decision you're comfortable with cost-wise. And it really comes down to what you're comfortable spending on a monthly basis, right? So that's the premium. And the second thing is understanding what your healthcare consumption is going to be for the year. So do you have a lot of prescriptions? Do you go to the doctor a lot? Are you managing conditions that, require regular lab tests and things like that? If so, you may be better off with a plan that has a lower deductible and lower out-of-pocket costs. So those are the big decisions. People often ask us about being able to keep their doctor, right? So being able to keep your doctor is an important decision. The unfortunate matter is networks change all the time. So even if your doctor takes a plan now, that might not be the case next month or 2 months. And I've had that happen to me. Doctors can change their networks all the time. Plans can change their networks all the time. So what we typically advise is if you have some flexibility on doctors, you may be better off just picking a plan that meets your budget because your doctor situation can change.
And now a word from our sponsor, Policy Genius. Hey, Jennifer, surveys show that over half of American households, that's 58 million households, have less than adequate life insurance. Why is that such a problem right now?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people, similar to a lot of financial chores, will put it off because they don't want to think about it or they think it's going to be very hard and frustrating. And, a lot of folks will have life insurance that they got a few years ago, but haven't reviewed their coverage since their life has changed. Maybe they got a new mortgage, maybe they had a new child, and so they find that their coverage isn't enough. What we do at Policy Genius is we make the process of figuring out how much coverage you should have and then getting good quotes for that coverage as easy as possible. It's all online. We've got really great and intuitive calculators and quoters so you can see how much you need, how much that'll cost you, and you don't even have to provide any contact details. So it's free and easy to use.
Wow, that sounds great. To find out more details, just head over to hisandhermoney.com/policygenius. And now back to the show.
Very good point. You're right. So what are some common mistakes that consumers make while they're shopping for health insurance?
Sure. I think the big mistake or confusion surrounds the different structures for out-of-pocket costs, right? So most people know what a premium is, which is what you pay every month to have the plan. Most people know how a deductible works because they're familiar with it from their car insurance or their auto insurance, right? So it's a set of expenses that you have to cover before your insurance kicks in. Unfortunately, there can be some complexity around the deductible. So if you're on a family plan, there can be an individual and family deductible. There could be a separate drug deductible, which is typically lower. So not understanding the structure of your deductible can be a big sticking point. The other is understanding how co-pays and co-insurance works. So a copay, even if you have met your deductible, you may still be required to pay the copay until you hit the out-of-pocket max. The copay is just the fixed fee that you get charged when you go to the doctor, go to the specialist, get a lab test done. And then co-insurance is different. Instead of a fixed fee, it's a fixed percentage of the cost, right? So you might see on your plan design that the co-insurance requirement is 20% up to the out-of-pocket max. That means you pay 20% of the cost of that procedure, that visit, and the insurance company pays 80% of it, right? So it's not a fixed fee like a $20 copay, it's a fixed percentage. And we found in our research that people are the least familiar with the concept of co-insurance, and it typically applies for things like hospital stays. So understand that there's really just a handful of concepts that you have to understand to know, what your healthcare budget would be for a given year.
Now, earlier you mentioned a previous question. You were saying that most insurance has to provide for the 10 essential benefits. That might have went over some people's heads. And so can you elaborate on what that exactly is?
Sure. So this is one of the consumer protections that the Affordable Care Act implemented. And basically it says that every single health insurance plan has to provide for the 10 essential benefits. And this includes things like preventive care, illnesses, ambulatory care, emergency care, maternity and newborn care, prescription drugs. So if you just Google the 10 essential benefits or go to our site or healthcare.gov, it'll list it. But basically it's the way to eliminate loopholes that previous plans before the Affordable Care Act could do, right? Because you could buy a plan that had a loophole for pre-existing conditions or a loophole for certain diagnoses. This is basically saying all plans have to cover at a minimum these 10 things. And it's all the 10 things that you would think about when you think about health insurance.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll make sure we have the links to those in the show notes. So what are your thoughts on the various Christian health sharing programs on the market?
Yeah, so this has been an interesting development, and I've done a little bit of research. I'm not an expert on this part of it, but at least from what I've seen, it is a way for folks to get qualifying coverage under the Affordable Care Act in a way that can be cheaper, right? Depending on the zip code you're in and your subsidy eligibility. So in my opinion, anything that increases choice for the consumer is a good thing. But I haven't had too much experience with these programs, but just anecdotally and what I've read, it seems like it could be a valid option for consumers, especially one that can be cost effective.
And earlier you mentioned that when it comes to figuring out costs, you said like the average family or person can get it for like under $75, but that came with like some tax incentives. So let's talk about that a little bit more. What are some tax incentives that people should be looking out for as they're doing all this shopping and figuring out what to do?
Sure. The big tax incentive is the premium tax credit that the government provides, right? This is for folks who make between 100 and 400% of the federal poverty limit. So for a single individual in most states, 400% is basically an income of $40,000 or $45,000, right? So if you make anywhere below that, you would typically qualify for a tax credit. It's a sliding scale, so the lower your income is, the higher your tax credit, and vice versa. And you can take this either on your tax return, or you can have the government, and it's a better deal to do it this way, or you can have the government pay that tax credit directly to your health insurance company. So instead of paying $300 a month for your health insurance plan, you'd be paying $150 or $100, depending on the size of your tax credit. So that's the biggest thing out there. And the way to figure out if you qualify for a premium tax credit is just go to one of the authorized health insurance marketplaces. So either healthcare.gov, or if you live in a state that has its own marketplace like California or New York, you'd go to your state health insurance marketplace. Licensed private marketplaces like Policy Genius also can calculate your subsidy eligibility. And it's basically based on your zip code, your household size, the ages of the people in your household, and then your projected income for 2017, right? So you enter those few pieces of information in, and you can get your estimated tax credit. So this is a big thing, and probably the biggest way to help control costs if you're shopping for health insurance on the open marketplace. Otherwise, tax-wise, we always encourage folks to look at HSAs and FSAs. So these are the health savings account or the flexible spending accounts. It allows you to put aside dollars pre-tax that you can use for qualified health expenses, right? So if you know, for example, that you have expenses like prescription drugs, or that you're going to have a certain amount of lab tests, these accounts can be a good way to shave a bit off because you're using pre-tax dollars for those expenses.
Makes sense. So how does Policy Genius improve the experience of having to shop on the open exchange?
Great question. So we designed an experience based on what was confusing and frustrating, right? So we actually tested a lot of different flows, a lot of different questions, and just interviewed a lot of consumers about their shopping experience to try to fix what was, their big blockers. And what we do is we do a couple things. One is we, walk you step by step and explain what's important to understand, right? So we explain what a deductible is. We explain what a copayment is. We explain the different plan types you might see, like EPO, PPO, HMO, all those acronyms that people are like, I don't know what that means. So we walk you step by step through all of that. And then we walk you through what I was talking about earlier, which are the decision trade-offs, right? So for example, the first question is, what's your budget? So what's the most that you can pay for health insurance on a monthly basis? And you have a little sliding scale. And when you move that budget slider down, you'll see how many plans are available at that price and what insurance companies are still available at that price. Because otherwise, when you ask a question in a vacuum, people are like, I don't know. Like, what am I losing if I pick a $300 plan? So the way we've designed the experience is to illustrate what happens when you settle on a $1,000 deductible or when you settle on a $500 plan. So that's how we've done the experience, and we've gotten really nice feedback from it so far.
Mm-hmm. If there's somebody tuned in who still kind of feels a little bit overwhelmed about the process of sifting through the various healthcare options and feels a little stressed out because they want to make the right decision about which plan to go with, what words of encouragement would you offer to that person?
I would say that it's totally understandable. We have folks who even work in the insurance sector and still are confused by health insurance, but it's a totally surmountable challenge. And we've designed our experience, for example, such that basically in 15 to 20 minutes, you'll know what you need to know to make an informed decision for you and your family. So you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours researching, trying to understand plans. Our rule of thumb is that within 15 to 20 minutes, you should know what you need to know to pick the right health insurance plan for you. As long as you go in with the expectation, like I said, that there's no magic bullet. There's no perfect plan that'll optimize for everything that you want, but you can get pretty close.
Awesome. So can you tell our audience more about Policy Genius and all of the various products that you have available?
Sure. So Policy Genius, relevant to this discussion, we have health insurance, and we have a few things around health insurance. One is we've got a marketplace and a decision navigator. So we've got all the on-marketplace and off-marketplace plans across the 50 states, and a very easy step-by-step way for you to see what plans are available in your zip code and then how to sort those based on your priorities. We also have a very comprehensive resource center for health insurance. So it's got, the 101s, everything you need to know, a glossary, key concepts, all of that's free. So that's health insurance. We also do the same thing for life insurance, disability insurance, renter's insurance, and pet insurance. So again, resources and a way to get very easy step-by-step quotes for you to compare what options are available to you. And all of that is free. You don't even need to put an email in there. We let you see quotes, shop the marketplace, compare and contrast, all from the comfort of your laptop or iPad.
Awesome. And if you're listening to the show on a podcast, just go to hisandhermoney.com/podcast to find a link to Policy Genius. And if you're watching us on YouTube, just look down below in the description box and there'll be a link there so you all can start getting your research on. And Policy Genius has done a wonderful job of making it much easier and much less stressful. Jennifer, we appreciate you coming on this show and sharing all your wealth of information with everybody to help us all figure this stuff out with ease. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you both for having me on.
Wow, that was incredible. Super helpful, super insightful. And we hope that you guys took a lot of information away. And we hope that this episode kind of put you at ease and set you on a course to be able to handle the Affordable Care Act and not be overwhelmed by it. Be sure to check out Policy Genius when you get a chance, because they make it to where you can understand it and it takes the stress out of the process. Again, you'll find a link in the show notes so that you can head over to Policy Genius and get started today. Well, that does it for this episode of the His and Her Money Show. Don't forget that you can find us always at our website, hisandhermoney.com. Here it is. No matter where you are on the road to financial freedom, the key is to start now and finish strong.
Thanks for tuning in to the His and Her Money Show. For more information on how to win with your finances, be sure to visit www.hisandhermoney.com.